Hi, I'm Phyllis Griffith with the Acadiana Native Plant Project, and I'm going to talk a little bit about seeds today. So this has got a PG warning because we're going to talk about plant sex. And I apologize in advance. I know a lot of the things I'm going to say are basic 5th grade ideas about how plants reproduce, but the reason it's important to think of these things when you are planning to collect seeds for sharing with friends or with your school is knowing what seeds do and what they're adapted to do by evolution in order to maximize reproduction for the plant. So first things first though, remember that plants, and I'm only really talking here about flowering plants, including grasses that have non-showy flowers. Plants reproduce a couple of ways. One is vegetatively, so they can send out cuttings from roots. For example, I have a beauty berry right back here that I just pulled out of the back of my property, and fortunately, I just dug it up from the roots. It was a pup from another tree. I don't know whether it actually grew from a seed, but I'm assuming it came up from the roots. And that's an example of vegetative propagation or vegetative growth. If you split an iris or a lily, or you take a piece of a tuber and you grow a new plant, or if you take a stem and a new plant grows from the bud, the nodes, that's an example of producing a new plant without the benefit of genetic recombination that sex provides, which is what flowers do. So for plants that are flowering plants, humans are really attracted to flowers, and there could be some great explanations in evolutionary psychology for why that is. But the short answer is that, the short explanation is that they usually signal spring, that we made it through a tough winter or something like that, but we are very attracted to flowers. So we tend to ignore a lot of foliage and other structures that can add to a beautiful landscape. But just as a quick 101 lesson, I'm going to show you a few flowers and seeds and remind you of what is happening when a particular plant gets pollinated. So in our garden we have mostly natives. They're not all natives, and it's in various stages of development. But I did want to at least show you an example of a great native plant to have. It's kind of laying down now, but this rosinweed, Silphium gracile, has been flowering for quite some time. And what you'll notice about most flowers, especially natives, is that they are going to flower in kind of asynchronously. So you've got some brand new flowers coming out here, but you have some that have already been pollinated, like these and all of these individual flowers. This is a composite flower, so a compound flower, so we have actually lots of individual small flowers in this one inflorescence that we see here. So after this was pollinated, and in this case it's by insects, and by the way, you should have a rosinweed in your garden because there are bees all over this thing almost all times of the day, and it's been documented that lots of pollinators use these. And then after it's pollinated, these heads will start to turn brown. You'll see the stem here is green under this brown one, which means it's not mature yet. And so should not be collected yet, but this one has already fallen off. So one seed looks like this. I'll pull this off if you can see this focused, and there's an embryo in there. So to remind you what a seed is a structure that contains an embryo plus some nutritive tissue that will help that embryo have food until it grows leaves so it can do photosynthesis itself. So this is the offspring of a fertilization. The embryo in there is the product of sperm and egg joining, and that sperm had come from another rosinweed anther. These flowers are very small, these individual flowers, but if you look up close, you'll find some anthers that have pollen, and pollen contains sperm. And at the base of each of these flowers is an ovary, and that ovary has an egg in it. And so by the sperm traveling by a pollinator to an egg, we make an embryo, and there's actually double fertilization to give us the endosperm that makes up the rest of the seed. Now, this is Also, this is really called a fruit. There's a seed in here, but this fruit, it has some extra tissues on the outside to help it get away from the parent plant. Let me talk about what fruit is here shortly. So you might be thinking of fruit as things like this lime, and it is absolutely a fruit, and it does contain seeds. Now, what you need to think of when you see fruit is that this is always a swollen ovary. It was part of a flower, and I'll show you some other fruits that you might have forgotten about. For example, okra. So here is a flower, okra flower, which is in the hibiscus family. As you can tell, it's a mallow, one of the mallows. And it had some anthers and stamens, and when pollinators carried pollen from one flower to another, there was fertilization that happened. And so these okra fruits are actually swollen ovaries. The petals used to be here, but have fallen off because the fruit is maturing. So a fruit is an evolutionary adaptation for dispersing seeds away from the parent plant. And the mallows and hibiscus, milkweed does this, they pop open, and those seeds will fall or be carried away by another animal. But they are, a fruit is a device. It's always a mature ovary, and it's always going to be an adaptation for dispersing the seed away from the parent. So here's some mature echinacea. So they have some new flowers here that are just in the process of being fertilized. No pollinators on them at this moment, but these are further along, not quite ripe yet. These are ready, and there are some seeds in there. So and this is also a composite. So all of these are seeds. There's an embryo in each one, and can be dispersed far from the parent plant. And another example of a great native is a bird pepper. And this bird pepper is a pepper, and there's a flower. And all of these flowers, all these fruit you see here, some are green and not mature yet, and some are red and mature, remember, each one of these fruits is a swollen ovary that developed from the base of a flower, and there used to be petals on this. There are no fruit that were not part of flowers. A few other stunning flowers that are going to make seeds and fruit. Here's a liatris. It's blooming. And there are, as you can see, hundreds and hundreds of individual little flowers on this inflorescence, and they're developing over time. And the ones further down that are older are the ones that have already been pollinated and will be going to seed in a kind of a asynchronously. Remember, in nature, this is a different way to think about flowers. If you're a traditional landscaper, you're thinking about flowers as kind of being there, staying there, and not really changing much. And the other thing, and that's not the way natives are. Natives have to have their own timing and have to be able to respond to seasonal changes, hedge their bets, have insurance policies, whereas cultivated plants that the horticulture industry propagates doesn't have those needs, and they may have lost the ability to do that. So there will always be different stages of flowering for most natives. Some are able to do these in bursts. This is a Salvia coccinea, which spreads very well both by seeds and vegetatively. You can take cuttings of this and stick them in the ground. And the other thing that natives do that we don't often think about is that they produce fertile seed. What you find with lots of cultivated landscaping plants is their genetics are not such that the seeds, they even produce seeds. When have you ever seen an azalea seed or even an azalea fruit? They don't. They are sterile, and they depend on the horticulture industry to produce more of those plants. Native plants are not like that. They have to have kept their ability to reproduce in nature. So as you're plant watching your Gara and your Kosteletskia, your salt marshmallows, and your ashy sunflowers, and your Asclepias, aquatic milkweeds, watch those plants, those flowers develop into fruit. Watch for the seeds to mature, and collect some, share them with your friends, spread them around your property, and you'll have lots more where that came from.